Hello, and welcome to today's SEI webcast, using a scenario to reason about implementing a zero trust strategy. My name is Shane McGraw, Outreach Team Lead here at the Software Engineering Institute, and I'd like to thank you for attending. We want to make our webcast today as interactive as possible, so we will address questions throughout today's talk. You can simply add them in to the YouTube chat area, and we'll get to as many as we can. Our featured speakers today are Tim Morrow, Rhonda Brown, and Elias Miller. Tim is a Situational Awareness Technical Manager in our CERT Division's Monitoring and Response Directorate. Tim applies the architecture-centric approaches to systems of systems to analyze and identify potential risks to improve cybersecurity. Good morning. Welcome, Tim.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Shane, for having me.
Rhonda Brown is a Senior Solutions Engineer also in our Search Division's Monitoring and Response Directorate. Before joining the SEI, Brown worked as a software engineer for 15 years. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And last but not least, we have Elias Miller. Elias is an Assistant Solutions Engineer also within our CERT Division. Elias joined the SEI in 2023 following employment at a cybersecurity startup. Welcome, Elias.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Great. Yeah, we're excited for the talk today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Morrow. Welcome, Tim. Again, thanks for joining me today, and it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Shane. So I really appreciate everyone coming today and listening to us. I'm hoping our title, by the time we're done with you after an hour, makes some sense to you. I think we focus a lot the past couple of years on zero trust and figuring out, well, first understanding what it is. We're going to talk a little bit today about that. We're going to talk about strategies for how to implement zero trust, things that we worry about. We're going to tell you a little bit about some of the guidance documents. I think it's kind of interesting how much guidance is being produced now in this area. And I think it's important to, when you figure out how do you want to apply your zero trust strategy. One thing that we focus here on at the SEI is, taking a risk-based approach to applying zero trust. And so to do that, you have to have a really good technical understanding of the problem. You have to understand how you're going to analyze it. That's very key, because the third part is how you're going to put that into contractual wording so that you can build that into your systems and your enterprises. So those three things are key. So we're going to touch on all those as we go through our discussion with you today. And finally, we're doing this because we're going to hold an industry day where we are going to ask commercial vendors to share their possible solutions to a scenario that we've engaged. And Rhonda and Elias are going to talk to you more about that scenario in just a minute. So thank you very much and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. We're good with distribution. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of background. Hopefully this is a review for most of you people. So this model, Zero Trust, developed by John Kinderog at Forrester in 2009. The biggest things about that was removing implicit trust and moving the security, from a network focus to users, applications, and workloads. So that's thinking about getting away from that VPN that people lived with so much during the pandemic. One of the key documents that came out there not too long ago was the NIST 800-207, and this talks about a zero trust architecture as a strategy. So that's the key thing is when you think about this document, it's just talking about the things you need to consider when you implement zero trust. It's not telling you how to do that. So when we say that, that means that zero trust is a journey. It's not going to be something that you can go talk to a vendor and buy at one stop a solution. It's not something that I do 6 months from now and I did a good job and I'm done. No, our risk change, our cyber threats change. It's why it's a journey. It's something that's going to be ongoing. Oops, get my thing down. So here's some additional principles dealing with zero trust. I was going to ask Rhonda, would you pick one that you'd like to talk about here as we let people read through them themselves?
Well, I'll talk about inspecting and logging all traffic. That's an important one because it's needed to identify any unusual activity before they become significant problems. The more meaningful log data you have when it's fed into a monitoring tool like a SIM, a security information and event management system, it'll enhance your ability to make decisions when you're doing your detecting and responding. And it helps to identify access behavior patterns. And it'll help you with supporting your audit functions and of course for forensics logging. So when you have all these distributed components connecting and communicating with each other, you want to make sure everything's running the way they should and detect irregularities.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Rhonda. That was really good. And I think the key thing here too is the logging. So it's dealing with a lot more instrumentation in your systems to be able to monitor and log. That's going to be very key as we hear about in this is our discussion today. Elias, how about, would you pick out one of yours that you'd like to chat about?
Sure, I'll follow up with the automation point there. When you are having all this logging and information being ingested, that enables you to create automated actions across your environment systems because you have that context and those events actually in your SIEM or whatever solution you're using there. Oftentimes, modern solutions call it SOAR, which is security orchestration, automation, and response. And this decreases the instant response times that you're dealing with. And it also allows you to take a little bit of the workload off of your everyday practitioners. And oftentimes this is a lot more work up front, but at the end of the day, what we're looking for is for Zero Trust to enable your practitioners, enable your business critical functions, and make it so that security is more tightly coupled with everything that you're doing in your everyday life.
Okay, thanks a lot, Elias. So I think the thing is you're going to hear it. It's a lot of these things we've heard about these as best practices here, but it's combining these things and adding some new capabilities with a policy, a decision in there, whether to allow trust or not. So let's go on here. So this is a really nice definition I like about a zero trust system. It's an integrated security platform that uses contextual information. And that's a key term that we're going to stress throughout this webcast about dealing with identity, security, IT infrastructure, and risk analytics. So I think the cool thing about Zero Trust is being able to be dynamic. When we get to the point where we have a mature Zero Trust implementation, we can use risk and have that vary depending on the conditions. And I think that's pretty exciting for our systems. And so that's that dynamic enforcement of security policies. So again, Zero Trust moves from that perimeter-based model to one more where you're dealing with the resource, the data itself, the identity of that person, focusing on that. And just there's no implicit trust. So that means that ideally for each action, you have to make sure that that's okay with your policy. So I think this is something that, will help improve organizations as they adopt Zero Trust to be more timely in addressing when there are potential threats and just improving their overall security. This is a very basic overview of what Zero Trust architecture is. This comes out of this special pub 800-207. And I think it's a really important one to understand for Zero Trust. So when you look at the system, you look down at, there's a subject there in that data plane. So that would be me logging in, say like I'm at home and I wanted to log into our network here at the SEI. And that would be, if I just went over a VPN or things like that, I'm doing it basically, I'm untrusted, because you would be assuming that I am a legitimate user logging into the system. And so that untrusted person comes into a policy enforcement point. That's a nice phrase, but basically if you keep in your mind that that's a switch. And that's basically something that can be turned on or turned off to let me go to whether it's an enterprise resource or a piece of data, whatever that is. So in a trusted way that I can go access that. And the thing that feeds into those policy enforcement points is a policy decision point. So that has a couple of terms there: policy engine, policy administrator. But in my mind, this is where you start to look and think about, well, what are the things that I need to consider to make that, decision whether that switch should be open or closed? And in this diagram in the gray boxes, it talks about different inputs that would feed into that policy decision point. I think currently this is more of an idea rather than actual implementation. This is where I think some of the research areas that we are seeing about how can I do policies about all these different types of inputs and get them to sync up. It's the challenge, and that'll be I think a very exciting point moving forward in this. But this is a real basic thing, is understanding this concept and how the policy enforcement point and the policy decision point are applied.
And Tim, can I chime in with a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So are you looking to apply zero trust strategy in hybrid environments, meaning a mixture of cloud and service providers, on premise or a private cloud? Is there a particular area you're focusing on today?
Right. So those are the things we're hoping to hear from people.
Okay.
So I would appreciate if you're out there listening to this, it would help me out. I know when we work with DoD, they have the 4 big cloud service providers that they have to work with, and trying to figure out, well, how does that apply with these things? Other people are more focused on operational technology, IoT things. So we're interested in hearing what people are facing, what challenges they're facing in their environments. So I appreciate, folks, if you could, send those us in chat or questions, and just let us know some of the things that you're dealing with. So thanks for that question, Shane. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about these policy enforcement points. And Elias, would you please elaborate on this for us?
Sure. This figure here is from Jerry Chapman and Jason Garvis's book, Zero Trust Security, back in 2021, which is a very good resource if you guys are looking for additional information about, the policy enforcement points or just zero trust in general. But I think the main thing that this diagram is highlighting is you can have policy enforcement points in multiple locations across your environment. You can have them at the user or subject level. So that's like an agent that you deploy onto somebody's device. You can have them at the network level. Oftentimes that's shown as firewalls or that whatever network controls you already have in place in your environment. Application level controls can also be used. But all these things are being used and controlled by the policy decision point, which is taking in information from many different locations. As we saw with like the previous model from NIST, you have ingest engines from many different sources, whether that be your SIEM, your public key infrastructure, or just your security monitoring stack. Is there anything else you would like to add to this, Tim?
No, I think you did a nice job there, Elias. His pictures kind of flipped around a little bit from the previous one I showed you, but I think these are the key things. So Rhonda's going to go on the next slide here to elaborate a little bit more on one of the deployment models.
Okay, yeah, so right now you're looking at the resource-based deployment model. You see the PDP on top, the policy decision point, making all the policy determinations. The device has a PEP. So the user device has usually a user agent on the subject system, like one of the ones that Elias talked about. Data is collected on that endpoint itself. And then you have a policy enforcement point in front of the actual resource that's being accessed. And this is an inline PEP. It's on the resource or in front of the resource. And this enforces all the network communication with the resource. So it's receiving all of its access control policy from that PDP. And then in the implicit trust zone you see there, that's the boundary for the whole security domain that is governed by that PEP. So the PEP can be running on an operating system, and the implicit trust zone would include all of the processes that interact with that operating system.
Right.
Again,
Yeah.
the models that we're going to show you, these deployment models are from that Zero Trust Security, Jason Garvis and Jerry Chapman.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. So I always like this deployment model. It's the simplest one, and this helps keep in your mind, the important aspects of things is where those PEPs are, that PDP, and what you're trying to protect. So thank you very much on that one. Elias, could you tell me a little bit more about this deployment model?
This is a enclave-based enforcement. What you're looking at here is basically an expanded implicit trust zone. Now, you use the implicit trust zone to cover more resources that are protected by the PEP. So these resources are, I mean, from some of the implementations I've seen, those are your legacy systems. And if you can't get a PEP directly onto that system itself, then you can group them together and get them protected with a unified policy from that PEP point. It increases the risk of multiple systems being affected. So that's one of the things that you have to consider when you're using this. That's why it's really important for you to know what your implicit trust zones are, what the attack surface you're really focusing on, and why you're doing these deployments and using the certain model that you are when you're creating your plans for zero trust enforcement.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I thought you covered that really great. Thank you. Rhonda, would you talk about the cloud routed deployment model, please?
Sure. The cloud routed deployment model has an on-premise policy enforcement point that you see in front of the implicit trust zone. It serves the same purpose as in the enclave-based model, but it doesn't have an ingress point into it, into this network. So it serves as a connector. And instead, the ingress point is accomplished by the PEPs running on the cloud. It's a pretty simple model. The user authenticates on their device with a policy, with their PEP on the device. They authenticate to policy decision point. Then traffic's directed to one of the cloud-based PEPs. It could be the one that's geolocated closest. It could be one with less latency. Then traffic will transit across the cloud, and it will find the policy enforcement point that will actually have a connection to the target resource. So it's pretty simple.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think this is a model that we see a lot of organizations start with on their zero trust, focusing around that identity and focusing on access to the whatever that resource is out there to be protected. Elias, would you bring us home on the deployment models?
Sure. The final deployment model we're going to talk about is a microsegmentation deployment model. And this brings the enforcement level onto the resource itself. This is very granular. And when you talk to vendors, sometimes they'll discuss their enforcement model as microsegmentation, pico segmentation, or nano segmentation. And a lot of that is just vendors speak to tell you how granular they can get the controls onto your resource in your environment. This separates everything out so that the data doesn't get transferred without going through a PEP between different locations. This prevents lateral movement, which is incredibly important for making proper defense of your systems. It's probably, this is the most advanced model that we've talked about, and is probably the most difficult to start with. There are many challenges which go into implementing this, and it's oftentimes done with some assistance from the outside vendors or contractors in order to get best information and practices implemented.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, this is something that seems like it's a little bit more mature implementation thing, that once you get a little bit more familiar, then as you can divvy up your network to increase your isolation of your different resources, this would be very effective. So I think we're going to see more in organizations using this deployment model.
So Tim, we have an audience comment, if you don't mind me reading it for comments from you. So a comment from Jim saying, in the summer of 2018, my team at the time architected and built a ZTA prototype in a data center in Hagerstown, Maryland, and demoed it to DISA, NIST, and other seniors. Since then, he sees Zero Trust and ZTA used interchangeably, which is really not. A ZTA is a dynamic trust environment. I would like to see how Zero Trust and Zero Trust architecture could be used with multiple clouds. So any comment there?
Yeah. So I think the thing is, well, I'll take it first and then I'll let you, Rhonda or Elias, you can chat with it too. So the thing is, it's kind of interesting when you get to multiple clouds, because then you start dealing with the identity, credential, and asset management aspects of things and the difference. So a lot of the cloud providers, they all kind of provide the same basic functionality, but when you go to implement them, they're typically done a little bit different. So the idea of federating those things, inputs, the ICAM inputs, to be able to be used is a challenge. And I think that's a very big challenge that we're seeing both in commercial industry as the federal agencies and the DoD. I think to me that's the main challenge on thing. I think the other thing is the policy decision point, those policies, as you mentioned it, is trying to raise the profile of those policies and appreciating what it is that you're trying to protect in real time. I think that's a challenge. And I think, understanding the architecture gives us a way to look to see, to make sure we have the logging and monitoring information to do that, making sure that we're comfortable with protecting like our high value assets out there. So those are my responses. I don't know, Elias or Rhonda, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I think you explained it pretty well.
Oh, thanks. Okay. I appreciate that. We're trying. So yeah, thank you for that. Is there any other?
Yeah, so and we got another one, and Jim just followed up with another comment just saying, and we have one from Kevin here, Tim. So I'll read just Jim's follow-up was, in a commercial world, I'd like to see how you can build zero trust environment in stages that build on themselves. So I don't know if you have any comment to that as well.
Oh, no, I think that's a key part. When you talk about a zero trust strategy, the idea is you need to develop a roadmap to do that, right? Because it's not just, I want to improve my security, but what can I afford? And what is my time frame that I need to get things done? Do I have the right people internally, or do I have to hire external people to have those competencies to do that? So you very much need to have a roadmap where, as an organization, you think about this and you figure out, what can I afford, at what level of risk to put that in there. So that's really key. So that's a good comment. Thank you, Jim.
And then Kevin just had, actionable zero trust is critical to understand and a vision to work to, but safety always comes first, especially in the ICS/OT space. So just a comment from him.
Yeah. So I say definitely. So that's the thing that's interesting. So a lot of times people think about zero trust, they focus on the enterprise. And is that safety critical, or is that life critical? Different things like that. Not really. You know what I mean? Most times things are not real time that you have to make a decision. And I think that's a part of our interesting work, is to think about, well, what does make sense? Can I apply all that zero trust strategy, all the ideas in these different, whether it's an operational technology, whether it's a tactical system out there that a DoD soldier would be using? That's the interesting. And I think that's where we like to stress, you have to take a risk-based approach and understand what you're trying to accomplish, getting a contextual information. So yeah, I agree. And I think that's what excites me and makes this fun.
And actually, one more, Tim, from Dave just chimed in with one of the items I believe is missing from the principles is knowing your data. Zero trust PEPs need to understand how important the data being requested is to the organization. An extensive set of metadata is critical.
Oh yeah. No, I think I need to send you $5 because that kind of leads into the next slide. So thank you very much. You're absolutely right. I think we're just going to roll on to that one, but thanks for that comment. So strategy comes first, and that's the thing that we're talking about for zero trust planning. Is we talked about, there's a lot of things that you have to weigh and make trade-offs on to apply a zero trust strategy. But based on research, so Mr. Toohill, he's our director. He's professor there at the Heinz School, but he's found in his research that, the costs associated with zero trust implementation deals with figuring out, defining, how do you access that data? Who can access it? What can they do with that data? That's a big part of the cost to implement it. And it's like, that's something you don't hear that much out there. You hear people talk about the strategy, but actually the time and effort to implement zero trust, he's saying, and that's what we're saying too, it's understanding your data is very key. And we'll talk about that in a few more slides, but thank you, David. I appreciate you bringing that up for us. So I think the other thing is we would like to talk about, and I ask you to look at on your own, is zero trust is the starting point on the road to digital trust. So digital trust is a term that's a little bit different, but it's kind of like, I like to think of it as, if I've done a really good job implementing zero trust, then me as an organization, people are going to want to trust me more. They're going to know I have a good reputation for doing the best I can with my security. They're going to see that I'm very transparent if there's ever a problem or an incident, that I share that. There's a kind of like a environment that you're trying to exude confidence in your ability to protect your assets and what people do with your system. So digital trust is an interesting term. I think please spend some time looking at that, and understanding that. So it's all about people, processes, and technology. It's a combination of things. So this is why I think system engineers, system to system type of stuff is very interesting, because you start to combine things together. I think a lot of times we see in commercial organizations, they acquire systems or companies and they have to mesh things together. Well, first you have to understand how they go together, what things are, and then you can think about how you apply zero trust. And I think the thing is, we're interested in hearing too, is seeing about applying it not just from an enterprise, not just from a system, but how those things integrate. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about our scenario for the industry day we're going to have here coming up, that challenges organizations to see how you would do that with zero trust. So a couple of years ago, I mentioned to you, we have a zero trust journey is what we consider to think about and get yourself ready for a strategy. I think I have the red bar across the top. It talks about SEI cybersecurity engineering assessments. I think the thing is always important to us is I need to be able to analyze and be able to understand and evaluate implementations. A lot of times people came to the SEI to say, I'm in trouble. I don't know what's going on here or why this is happening. So we have a lot of different assessment methods to help us from an architecture point of view, from a process point of view, to look in and be able to quickly identify problems and help people understand, how did you get into this situation? So I need to think in my mind as I develop these systems and a strategy, I need to make sure I develop those artifacts to be able to do that. And so that's not just having that strategy, but as an infrastructure, I need to know, well, what is my architecture? It's really challenging now with cloud-based systems that, the things can come and go very quickly. So getting a feel for that. The whole prepared thing is all about getting a sense of, I have an idea of where I want to go and how that fits into my organization's mission. And I have that executive endorsement. The plan part, we talk about inventories. And I think that's really key because it's understanding, well, what am I working with? And I think one thing that we've missed in here, and I have to update the slide here at some point and write about it a little bit, is like my APIs too. So many of the services that you get from going to a cloud are API based. So it's not just that I know my data, how my data flows through a system, whether it's an actual person or if we're doing with non-person entity, that's another term that came out of 800-207, but it's like more the machine to machine type of interfaces. We need to understand all those things to be able to consider how to apply zero trust a strategy to our systems. The other thing is system security engineering. I have a slide. We're going to chat about that really quickly, but I think that's important because that's help you make those decisions of why I did something and be able to document that. The assess column is kind of figuring out, I need to do pilots. You can't jump, right in the deep end. You have to have some pilots and do that. The maturity. So a lot of times I need to, if I'm going to implement things, a roadmap, I need to assess, well, how well is it working? Am I being cost effective? Am I addressing my risk that I'm trying to do? Do I have gaps? So those are things that we ask people to think about. And then the implementation is, we've talked about policy. We talked about to make that change for a zero trust approach, you have to educate your people, both management as well as your IT. And so I'm sorry. No, okay. And so deployment, operate. So all these things, it's not this that when zero trust, you do it that first time, that's great, that's awesome, but you got to keep it up. So how you deploy it, how I maintain that, how do I upgrade my capabilities? Those are all things that you have to figure out as a part as you do your roadmap and stuff. So being able to develop a good set of metrics and how to measure that, and especially the change management is going to be key, because we talked about all those different inventories over there. We have to make sure that we have a really good understanding of what is our current configuration, when that changes, how often things change. That's part of what's going to be, you need to be responsible for maintaining your security. So we have some common challenges that we hear from our customers as working from them. So I was going to ask, Rhonda, would you maybe share some of your experience of what you know about some of the challenges there?
We were talking about asset inventory in the previous slide. And, you know, I think about the awareness and accuracy too. So when you're developing context-aware policies, you have to understand your current network topology, your data flows, what your resources are. You have your business critical processes. You have underlying assets, right? And you have interaction between all your systems and devices, how they interact, data that's passing through. All of that's a lot of information. And this is all what informs your zero trust architecture roadmap. So it's important to understand all of those, you know, what all your technologies are.
Right. I think that's one thing that Rhonda's worked on a lot lately for one of our customers, is trying to figure out, well, what data is actually being used to help protect their systems. How's that data going through this system? A lot of times these things are not documented. They're in people's heads. They may be something that people started with a while. They do prototyped and things. And so these are very challenging things, as Rhonda said, to accumulate.
And Tim, someone before was talking about adopting this incrementally. And I think that this is one of the things, understanding these things kind of helps you identify those key points so that you can get an idea where to start.
Right. No, thank you. That's very good, Rhonda. Elias, would you share with us one of the challenges, which you know?
Sure. I'll speak from my experience working with customers is getting a proper inventory. Inventories are not static things. So you have to constantly be assessing what you actually have, what you are working with. And without that, you're not able to progress further into zero trust. Like, you can't automate things if you don't know what you're actually working with. You can't automate your data flows if you don't know what data flows you have and what data flows you need. And it's really important as you're getting into the planning phase to go through this and make sure you have as much information as possible about all these things, your assets, your subjects, your data flows, workflows, and APIs, in order to get proper and good flow throughout the journey as you're going through.
Okay, no, thanks, Elias. I was wondering, did either one of you have any other challenges you'd like to chat about, or?
Sure, I can take that. When I'm talking about like the flow itself, this goes into the adoption cost. The adoption cost for zero trust is oftentimes really high because of the amount of work that you need to do to get into the implementation phase of your journey. Like, you are going to have people sitting in a room, and some of those people are very expensive. You're going to have a lot of time spent, and you're taking away from other opportunities which are either business critical, or they're just, you can't put one person who is essential, your network system administrator, and they need to understand many different things, many different systems. And if they're busy working on this project you're taking away from other opportunities that they could be working on. And that's just another cost the business is going to incur. There's also different things, like, are you considering using a contractor? Are you using internal resources for this? What are your business cases that you're really trying to key in on? And that's one of the things that industry talks about a lot, is getting those early wins and to continue to drive and incentivize the business leaders to continue to invest in this. And we're seeing that security is becoming more and more of a business use case to a lot of industries. And so people are investing more money into their security culture, which is a good thing. And hopefully that helps drive the adoption of zero trust throughout industries.
Absolutely. Thanks, Elias. Rhonda, did you want to add anything else?
I think he covered it well. The measurement part and success. I know a lot of times you hear about the users having a better user experience and things like that. But I think as long as you're going through and making all of your changes, when you're doing the implementation, you can really even define the measurements and define the successes you want to have. It doesn't have to be so big and overwhelming all at one time. And I think a lot of times when people talk about zero trust, it's a big overwhelming thing.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Rhonda. Hey, Shane, I was wondering, did you have any questions?
We had a couple more comments, Tim, and questions. I'll just read them and to see if they trigger anything for you guys, or you can just kind of leave them where they're at. But if they spark any conversation. So Jim had mentioned, could the concepts found in super cloud, federated clouds that can be used in conjunction with ZTA?
I guess I'm not familiar with the term super clouds, but definitely federating. So I think, well, I'll start and let the others chime in, but I think, we always hear about the government going to the cloud to reduce cost, to reduce the requirements on their staff to be able to maintain systems. And I think that makes sense, right? I should be able to say each year, oh, I think this one company does better, it gives me a better value, so I should be able to change. But the thing that I always have to watch is, you mentioned it, is how things are implemented. That's kind of scary, and I think that's something that's not appreciated. It's understanding the technical skills that you need for your organization to make decisions, to say, well, I would like to move off of this one cloud service provider to another. That's something that I don't think it's appreciated as much. I do think the idea of resiliency and being able to have multiple cloud service providers is a good idea, but I take it with a grain of salt. That was my thoughts on it. Elias or Rhonda, did you want to add anything on that one?
I think regardless if you have different providers or not, it's really important to have common identity system. When you have too many separate identity systems, then you have too many, your logging is just inconsistent, and your analysts are going to have to try to resolve all of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the thing. That's for sure. Okay. So I think we addressed that one, Shane. Was there another one?
Yeah, Kevin had a comment too. Just, you must know your data and network flows in both directions. You must align them to your assets for any model of trust to work. So I'm assuming that's an accurate comment, Tim.
Oh yeah, no, I'll give you 2 thumbs up on that one. So thank you. We appreciate that.
And the last one, Jim had a question/comment. Why not apply security starting with the design of systems/environments? And I know that's something the SCI pushes for now, but is that still lagging in other areas, Tim, or other industries?
Yeah, I think we're hearing that from CISA, the secure by design.
Yeah.
That's a very big push, and we're a part of that. I think that we've learned over the years that, especially security, it's not something you bolt on. You have to design that in there. So that means when we look at an acquisition lifecycle, I need to keep moving to the left. I need to be back out there where they're defining requirements, defining the capabilities of the systems, thinking about how can I secure my system. So that's a part of what's, building that security in for us. So that's why architecture is very important. That's why that zero trust strategy is really important to get a contextual awareness of, well, what is my organization or what my system is doing? What's most important? How do I protect that? Those are all things that you need to do over to the left in the life cycle so you understand, and then you could architect in the design to build to that. So that, I agree with that. Elias or Rhonda, did you want to add on to that, or you're good?
I'll add a small piece. It's just that it is difficult for some industries to do that. They can't exactly do a greenfield approach either because they don't have the money to invest in that at the time, or they're looking at what is business critical at the moment. And so if they are going to be completely upending their current business operations just for a security change, it's oftentimes not seen as valuable or reasonable. And they don't have the money to stand up a mirrored environment or similar environment to then transfer everything back over once you do have the new environment available.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we'll kind of roll on and see how things go, but appreciate people's feedback and comments. Thank you very much. So this is something that I've started over the last couple of years. The Zero Trust has been very important. The president wrote an executive order. It's something that from a federal agency point of view, from a DoD system, commercially, people have to figure out how to apply Zero Trust is one of the aspects to improve cybersecurity. So I'm trying to keep a running track for different areas. Well, what's the current there? What are the current guidance? What are the documents? What do I need to be thinking about? So I think it's very interesting. It's growing. It's why I like to use a mind map so I can add things on. But I appreciate if you guys take a look at this slide. If you see something we're missing, please let me know. I'm going to update it. But this is what I work from. And so when we go to a customer, if it's a DoD customer, I understand my requirements there, what I need to support, whether if I'm CISA. So I find these types of maps helpful. I want to talk a little bit about the different maturity models. They're slightly different when we talk about CISA Zero Trust maturity model. They recently did a version 2.0 where they added another maturity stage, but they focus on these 5 pillars. It's the identity, devices, networks, application, and workloads, and data. And they have cross-cutting across this. They talk about visibility analytics, the automation orchestration, and governance. So they talk about a little bit different than we'll mention here on the DoD, but they have 4 different levels. And the next slide kind of gives you an idea of, well, what do they consider maturity? And I think it's good. It gives you an idea, but it's not like crisp. Well, how do I assess against that? I think that's some of the challenge that we're seeing, that there are not assessment methods out there, processes out there. People tend to focus on, the red team, blue team, purple team, seeing how you can get into the system. But I think we are focusing on analysis methods that focus more on the desktop type of things, the architecture type of things, to think about risk and things like that. And I think developing frameworks and way to think about, for different types of systems, what's important for them for Zero Trust and how to assess them, that's an area that we're going to be working on for the next few years. The DoD is a little bit different. They have 7 pillars. So if, rather than being cross-cutting, as we saw in CISA, they are one of the main pillars there. So I took this out of the DoD has a Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office, where they're under the mandate that by 2027, all DoD components have to implement the target level of this Zero Trust. So you can see with the mind map, there's different things, different capabilities, functions that the DoD is looking for. I find this really helpful. This is a one-page thing that helps me understand what all I should be thinking about when I consider applying Zero Trust to a system. So I really like this diagram too. And their version of the maturity model, it kind of plays into different aspects. To me, it looks a lot like what we talk about in our journey. Their discovery is understanding data, assets, application, and services, the DAS, mapping data views, different things like that. But you start to get a sense of, building in that maturity and see what they feel comfortable with. And I think this is something that's evolving as they work to implement zero trust and try things out to see is, well, how does that work? Does that work very well, in an enterprise versus something like a weapon system? I think that's challenging, and those are things that we are working on currently. So this is kind of getting to the point, like the title of our thing is using scenarios. So a lot of times I understand the strategy. Okay, we read about those documents. I showed you that mind map. We get the idea that I have to do something by some time frame. The federal agencies are this year, DoD is 2027. And it's like, but how do I get there? So for DoD, they have a guide that's called mission engineering. And I think if you think in terms of an agency or a commercial organization, think about the workflows and things like that. But you're trying to do is get enough understanding of what are you doing as an organization? What are you doing? What do your system need to do? So we talk about mission and figuring about, okay, what does this workflow take to be able to start from here and go through the whole process? So that typically involves going across multiple systems. I need to understand what data is involved, how it flows through the system, who's touching it, do they have the right credentials to be able to do that? So to me, that's helping understand the basic operations. I need to understand the architecture system, how things are connected. If I have that information and I start to walk through with a customer these missions or workflows, then I can talk to them and see, is there gaps? Are we not covering the system in a secure way? Are there things that are a piece of high value, whether it's asset, maybe it's my data here. How do I protect that? I need to be able to, use assessment techniques to be able to identify these mission gaps. So this is something that mission engineering helps us develop the context for. We focus on developing reference architectures. I think one of the things that we're wanting to work on is for a specific type of system or enterprise, we want to have reference architectures that from a zero perspective, people need to think about, and we would identify these are the areas that we suggest you focus on in your roadmap. I think the last couple were kind of just that kind of going back to the stakeholders. A lot of times you think you understand a system, but until you talk to somebody that either is writing code, testing the system, trying to use the system, you have to talk to the stakeholders to see how the system works for them. And then we apply that to considering the security of that system. So a lot of times this is where you document assumptions, constraints, different things about it that you need to think about. How do I maintain this system too? And these are all information that goes into what you need to do to implement that security and continue to do that successfully in the future. I like this one because this was one I think in mind, and that was that system security engineering block I showed you on the journey. Is this is what I need to do. I need to have enough information to understand a problem. I need to figure out, well, how can I solve that, providing evidence, and then developing assurance cases and demonstrating that. So I like the NIST 800, 160, and this is an example, but these are the things from a cybersecurity point of view, I need to think about. I need to make sure that I have enough artifacts in my system to understand, to be able to address and apply, to be able to secure my system. So we've got to the point where, oh, geez. Oh, I forgot. So Shane, was there any questions? Any additional questions?
So we do have another question, Tim, that we can get to for Vernon. One thing I want to address too, some different attendees are asking about slides. So I will get the slides from Tim, make them the PDF, and we will add them to the SCI website for people to get. So we will get the slides added for sure and email out a link a little bit after the presentation. But the question from Vernon, Tim, was in the area of IAM, the trustworthiness of the identity store is key. How do you ensure that?
Oh.
In the area of IAM,
Trust identity.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Identity and asset management. I'm sorry, access management. So I guess you're dealing with different vendors and implementations, and to see how that's, well, I guess, see, to me, that's like, I need to understand contextually how you're using that, right? If I pick a vendor's product and I see how I use it, how it protects my system, and then, yeah, I guess I don't have a real clean answer on that one, but I need to, I think, if you have a product or a vendor solution, you have to think about how it fits into yours. But let me, I guess, unless Elias and Rhonda, you have anything, maybe we'll take that one as something we can address better. I'm not saying it very well right now.
Well, I think it's like with certificates, the policy decision point establishes a trust relationship. It's all about establishing that trust relationship. And as far as implementing that, I think it's done a couple of different ways, but it's a real important part of identity.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I appreciate you helping me out there. That sounds good. So, Shane, if we're good on questions.
So one other real quick one, Tim, and maybe you're
Mhm.
getting to this point. We had put the link in the chat about Zero Trust Industry Days. Are there any speaking opportunities or vendors needed still, or is that deadline passed?
We're still, yeah, there's still opportunities.
Okay, so I'll let
that's
you.
good.
I'll sync you up with David after the event. Okay, but did
Okay,
David
no,
answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
that would be great. No, I appreciate that. We're always looking for that. So that's the thing. It kind of is bringing us towards the end here. So we want to talk about our industry day. This is why we're trying to drum up your interest, and hopefully you'll attend that. So I was wondering, Rhonda, were you going to start us on this aspect?
Yeah, our industry day events is where we bring together providers of zero trust solutions. We put a request for participation out there, and they have the opportunity to highlight all their abilities to implement a strategy using the zero trust philosophy in different environments, enterprise IT, or in this year's case, manufacturing environment. So we do this through a scenario. So we frame the problem statement in the form of a scenario, and this way the participants talk about how they'll protect the systems. We don't frame it as, individual zero trust items. It's through the scenario and through, here's our goal, protecting these systems. You see these 6 guidance documents. We refer to those in the request for participation. And if we go to the next slide, for 2022, we had a fictional company, and they had some legacy systems. So how do you address legacy systems? Are you happy with them? Are you ready to tear them apart and integrate them separately? And it's just that legacy systems are such a challenge with zero trust. It's not as easy to integrate like cloud services are. There's a lot of different issues with those. We had 4 identity and access management systems that the providers, had to address in this scenario. We wanted them to address federation and talk about a holistic way of controlling access across multiple cloud applications there. And centralized security operations center, they were broken across teams. So these were some of the challenges that we wanted to focus on the 2022 event. And we focused on those 2 documents in particular at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, so
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'll take this. Sorry.
Oh.
When we were talking from the industry day, we also had a panel discussion, and in that panel discussion, we asked these 4 questions here, and we were looking to get some definitive answers and some more information from the participants. What areas does zero trust need further research? That's kind of where we came in across our challenges, and it was really important that these are the areas that we're going to be focusing on, and where we see development needed. It's also important to know what doesn't need further development. But it was a really interesting conversation to hear about, and there's still recordings of some of these discussions if you guys want to find those yourselves.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think it would be great if you both can talk about the scenario for this year's industry day, because I thought it was kind of interesting. So if you'd share what we think it would be challenging for these vendors to deal with.
Okay, yeah, so this year we're focusing on a chip manufacturing facility that is on an island, and it's in a smart city. So most people in this on this island work for this chip manufacturing facility. And so there's a few things that we want to bring and highlight for these vendors to really dig into. We have things like connected services that they need to take information on. You know, how does a smart city reliance on IoT? What risks does that create? And what if you're using, you know, a private cloud or, you know, a public cloud environment, and so you're hybridizing different things across your entire environment? Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Rhonda?
Yeah, we put together, it's like a story, and we, you know, we're not implying that you have to really get into the details, that we have machines that are dual mode for satellite and cellular, but we really wanted to focus on how, you know, with the smart cities and with IoT, how these devices end up getting smarter and smarter and very functional, and yet security kind of wasn't really designed to handle good security. So you have, you know, your waste management systems in the smart city, your public transportation systems, and all your meters and street lights and sensors to detect leaks in systems, you know, water systems. How well are these really secure? Smarter, when you're in a manufacturing environment, smarter code, smarter PLCs and sensors, and really they're on a system that has open communications. So there are a lot of issues that, you know, we, especially with the IoT, that we wanted to come up with. You know, it's in, I think, human nature to design something. If I'm an artist, I want to design something that works and that looks great, that works great, but I'm not really deciding at the same time how to keep people from coming in, stealing and destroying it.
Right. So I appreciate it. I think that's very interesting to think of these different aspects. I think we're running out of time. So I was going to say we'll jump to the last slide. And if you could kind of wrap it up for us, Rhonda, that would be really great.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, what I just mentioned is I probably went ahead of myself as far as concerns to address, but you know, you see legacy systems on there. And a lot of them, you know, devices built with a backdoor for calibration. So that's common. And then people using factory defaults. So you have all the legacy OT systems. In 2022, we had legacy systems, but we're focusing this year more on the operational technology side of things with older protocols and unencrypted protocols. And we're also focusing on disruption of connectivity for any reason. Someone called in and mentioned safety. So you don't hear much about safety, but you know, we focused on high availability. So if this semiconductor plant goes down, and they made an investment, it's amortized, they expect to get so many million a day. If this goes down even for an hour, so you might have safety concerns, but you're really going to have a lot of loss of revenue or loss of money. So accessibility, and then IoT. So that's what we're concerned about this year.
Right. No, I'm sorry, Rhonda. It was me. I talked too much earlier and I just squished this at the end. So I'm sorry about that. So I had to cut it short because our time's almost up. So we wanted to just say that we have a zero trust collection here. So if you go to the links, you can see about what we did on our 2022, all kind of documents, of recordings, videos, and stuff like that. There's also information what we're going to do for 2024, more specifics beside what Rhonda and Elias just spoke to you. So I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. And back to you, Shane.
Yeah, Tim, Rhonda, and Elias, great discussion today. We really thank you for sharing your expertise. And lastly, we do thank you all for attending today. Upon exiting, please hit the like button below the video window and share the archive if you found value. Also, you can subscribe to the SEI's YouTube channel by clicking on the SEI seal in the lower right corner of the video window. As mentioned, we will invite you to attend Zero Trust Industry Days. We'll have a link in our follow-up email that will take you to information for the event. And last but not least, we will have our next webcast will be on May 12th, and it will be on DevSecOps with Hassan Yassar. Any questions from today's event, please send to info@sei.cmu.edu. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.